86 picograms, 86 trillionths of a gram in a single milliliter, an amount so small the laboratory is not really measuring a substance anymore. It is measuring the shadow of one. On March 10, 2024, at Indian Wells, that number attached itself to the best tennis player on earth. 8 days later, it happened again. And then, for 5 months, the sport that tests its athletes in the name of transparency told nobody at all. When the file finally opened, on August 20th, everything inside it had already been decided. 2 failed tests, a secret defense, a full acquittal. The trophies would stay, the ranking would stay. That same afternoon, one man typed what half the locker room was thinking, and only he was reckless enough to say. He failed 2 steroid tests, should be gone. His name was Jannik Kyrgios, and what followed over the next 2 years turned that outburst into something close to a prophecy, just not the prophecy anyone expected. So what exactly did Jannik Kyrgios warn us about? And why did nobody listen? That is exactly what we are here to find out. To understand why that voice carried, go back to what the voice had done. Jannik Kyrgios announced himself in 2014 at Wimbledon, 19 years old and ranked 144th in the world, by taking down Rafael Nadal, the world number 1, in 4 sets. The following spring, in Madrid, he met Roger Federer for the first time and beat him too. In 2017, he played Novak Djokovic twice and won both times. 3 names that defined an era, and Kyrgios beat every one of them the first time he stood across the net. No preparation, no ritual, no fear of the order of things. That run made him box office, and it made him something rarer, a man whose talent bought his opinions a hearing. At his peak, he reached number 13 in the world, and in July of 2022, he walked onto center court for a Wimbledon final. He lost it to Novak Djokovic, and it stands to this day as the closest he ever came to the sports summit. That is the man doing the warning. And here is the detail almost everyone forgets. He and Jannik have shared a court exactly once. Miami, March 2022, a 4th round match. Sinner, 20 years old, won it 7-6, 6-3, and the handshake at the net was warm. This was never a rivalry. There was no feud to inherit, no bad blood stored up, which is exactly what makes what came next so uncomfortable. The warning did not come from an enemy. It came from a peer who watched the machinery move and did not like what he saw. Keep one image from this chapter though, the wrist that beat 3 kings. It is already running out of time. Now open the file itself because the whole argument lives in the details. The substance was clostebol, an anabolic steroid, not one positive test. 2. March 10th in competition at Indian Wells. March 18th out of competition, 8 days later. Sinner's explanation, accepted later by an independent tribunal, went like this. His fitness coach, Umberto Ferrara, had bought an over-the-counter healing spray in Italy called Trofodermin, which contains clostebol. His physiotherapist, Giacomo Naldi, used that spray on a cut on his own finger, then gave Sinner daily massages without gloves between March 5th and March 13th. 3 independent scientific experts agreed the contamination story held, and the concentrations were tiny, 86 and 76 picograms per milliliter, numbers the World Anti-Doping Agency's own council would later place a million miles away from doping. That is the defense, and it deserves to be heard in full, because everything that follows stands against it. Here is what happened procedurally. In April, 2 automatic provisional suspensions were imposed. Both were overturned on urgent appeal, one within a single day, the other within 3. Sinner kept playing. The public knew nothing for 5 months. On August 20th, the Sports Integrity Agency announced the case and its verdict in the same breath. No fault or negligence, no suspension, only the ranking points and prize money from Indian Wells surrendered. Within hours, Kyrgios posted, "Ridiculous, whether it was accidental or planned. You get tested twice with a banned substance, you should be gone for 2 years." And when the defense pointed to the microscopic amounts, he answered that too, the amount does not matter. He failed 2 steroid tests, should be gone. 3 days later, Sinner removed Naldi and Ferrara from his team. Hold on to the second name. This story is not finished with Umberto Ferrara. What made that August different was who else started talking. Denis Shapovalov, a Wimbledon semi-finalist, wrote, "Different rules for different players." Liam Brody, who has lived the slower side of that system, put it plainly. Plenty of players go through the same thing and have to wait months or years. The complaint was never that a champion had doped. The complaint was that the machine had moved for him at a speed nobody else gets. Then the machine itself appeared to blink. On September 26th, the World Anti-Doping Agency appealed the acquittal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, asking for a suspension of 1 to 2 years, the exact range Kyrgios had named. His response was a laugh in writing, maybe not so innocent after all. A hearing was scheduled for April. It never happened. On February 15th, 2025, a Saturday, the case ended in a settlement. 3 months, February 9th to May 4th. The 3 months had a legal name, not doping but responsibility. The strict liability every athlete carries for the people in his corner. The steroid was the physiotherapist's mistake. The suspension was the price of employing him. The agency that had demanded up to 2 years signed its name to 3 months. Read that again. The window missed every Grand Slam on the calendar and ended the week of Rome, his home tournament. Kyrgios spent that Saturday at his keyboard. No titles lost, no prize money lost. Sad day for tennis. Fairness in tennis does not exist. And for once, the sport did not dismiss him as a heckler. It went quiet. And then it started agreeing. Because while the case crawled, the winning never stopped, and it is the winning that turned a complaint into a prophecy ignored. Scene 1. New York, September 2024, 2 weeks after the file opened. The season had begun with his first Australian Open title, weeks before any sample came back positive. Now, Sinner won the US Open with the appeal still forming over his head, then closed the year at 73 wins and 6 losses, 8 titles and a Davis Cup, the third player in history, Roger Federer and Serena Williams, to go a full season without losing a match in straight sets. Whatever was in the file, it was not in the tennis. Scene 2. Melbourne, January 2025. Sinner defended the Australian Open title in straight sets. In that same fortnight, in that same city, Nick Kyrgios finally returned from surgery and lost in the first round. 3 weeks later came the settlement. The man asking the questions was disappearing from the only stage where the answers might have mattered. Scene 3. The return. Rome stood and applauded him back in May and carried him all the way to the final. In Paris, he held 3 championship points in a final for the ages and lost it after 5 hours and 29 minutes to Carlos Alcaraz. And on July 13th, 2025, Jannik Sinner became the first Italian singles champion in Wimbledon history. Minutes after the trophy touched his hands, Kyrgios posted a single character. An asterisk. No sentence, no argument, one typographic mark, the kind editors attach to a record that needs a footnote. An asterisk is a very small thing. What it was drawn on top of was not. Here is the part of the story that does not fit the easy version, the one where a bitter rival shouts alone. The chorus kept growing, and its credentials kept getting heavier. Stan Wawrinka, a 3-time major champion, wrote one line on the day of the settlement: "I do not believe in a clean sport anymore." Novak Djokovic, 24 majors, told a room in Doha that most of the locker room did not think the process was fair, and that a top player with access to top lawyers can almost affect the outcome. Serena Williams, 23 majors, said it with a smile that did not soften it. "If I did that, I would have gotten 20 years. Let us be honest." And in the same interview, she said the other true thing: men's tennis needs him. Both sentences fit in one mouth, and that is the paradox this era has to live with. Sitting under all of it was one more uncomfortable file from the same season. Iga Swiatek, a 5-time major champion, had accepted a 1-month suspension in her own contamination case. A reminder that the sports scales rarely read the same number twice. The institutions answered. The anti-doping agency's general counsel, Ross Wenzel, defended the outcome in terms no one could misread. This was a case a million miles away from doping, and the scientific feedback said it could not have been intentional. So hold both truths at once. Every formal ruling cleared Jannik Sinner, and 3 generations of champions looked at the same file and could not shake the feeling that the rules bend near the top of the rankings. It sounded like a scandal about one man. It was not. It was a referendum on whether anyone still trusted the scoreboard behind the scoreboard. While all of this played out, the man who shouted first was losing a different argument in the only court that never negotiates: his body. The ligament in his right wrist, the one that stabilizes the joint the way the cruciate stabilizes a knee, tore. He tried stem cell therapy in the United States. Then came the operations, 4 rounds of them across the wrist and the knee. The comeback of 2025 lasted a handful of matches. The comeback of 2026 lasted 2 weeks of January. A first-round loss in Brisbane, then a first-round doubles exit in Melbourne beside Thanasi Kokkinakis on a wrist that could no longer carry a week of singles. By then, his ranking had drifted to somewhere around 671. The man who beat 3 kings on first meeting was relying on wildcards to get into the building, and his own summary was one sentence: "I cannot do another surgery. Whatever you think of his methods, understand what the warning cost." Every post pinned him deeper into the role of the bitter man on the sideline, and the sideline was the only place his body still allowed him to stand. It sounded like jealousy. It was not that simple. It was a man watching the sport move on from both of them in opposite directions. And Sinner carried his own version of the bill. He admitted to sleepless nights while the case was open, and his coach, Darren Cahill, described a player dragging real physical and mental turmoil through that season. He was cleared 3 times over and still walks into arenas where part of the crowd sees an asterisk instead of a man. He almost never took the bait. Asked about Kyrgios one more time in Cincinnati, he closed the door with one line, "I think I said all." And then, in July 2025, he made the one move nobody could explain for him. He rehired Umberto Ferrara, the coach who bought the spray. The team called it continuity and performance. Much of the public, including his own fans, called it a shock. The case was closed. The wound, by his own hand, was not, because time runs the only tribunal in this sport with no appeals process. Most of the people watching this never held a championship point, but plenty still hold a racket. The Thursday night doubles, the club ladder, and somewhere after 40, the morning after the match starts keeping a file of its own. The elbow, the shoulder, the lower back, the knee that objects to every staircase. That is the price the legends pay, collected from everyone else in smaller coins. Recent work points to a reason that pain keeps winning after 40, one that almost never gets said out loud in this sport. This video is not the place where it gets explained. It has its own. It sits pinned as the first comment under this one, and it asks for a few minutes before your next match. What it offers is the one thing this whole story ran out of, a warning that arrives early enough to matter, which brings the story to now. July 12, 2026. Jannik Sinner defends his Wimbledon title against Alexander Zverev in 4 sets, collects a 5th major, and begins his 81st week as the #1 player in the world, far enough into history to enter the all-time top 10 for weeks at the top. None of it came free. Carlos Alcaraz took a US Open final from him, and for a few months the ranking itself, before Sinner took it back. The man who warned us watches from a ranking below 600. So, was the warning right? About the man, the record says no, 3 times over. A tribunal, a settlement, a scientific file that put him a million miles from doping. About the system, the record cannot say no, because the system is the thing that changed shape in public view. 5 months of silence, suspensions lifted in days, a demand of 2 years that became 3 months that missed nothing that mattered. The warning was never really about whether one man cheated. It was about whether anyone would still believe the next verdict. On that charge, no acquittal has ever been issued. If this era's stories deserve an honest record, subscribe and follow the next one, and leave your verdict in the comments. Was Nick Kyrgios right to sound the alarm, or wrong about everything except the noise? Until then, the champion keeps serving, the asterisk keeps waiting, and the scoreboard, as it always has, gets the final word.